Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to have back on the show Stanford Research Institute survivor, whistleblower, and hero, Marc Victor, and his amazing spouse and hero, Marina Louw. If you missed the episode we did on Stanford Research Institute, which we will be calling SRI for the context of this interview, recently featuring Marc, Marina, Frida, and Ariadne, I'll link it below. It was an incredible interview reuniting three MKUltra survivors who were all in the projects at the same time back in the 50s and 60s at SRI, and who were able to corroborate each other's stories and talk about their experiences as children being used in these horrific human experimentations. Marc and Marina's YouTube documentary, The Valley, Inside MKUltra, is another terrific resource to hear about and learn how California's Silicon Valley was infiltrated by Nazi scientists through Project Paperclip, and the connection Stanford and California had to the inception of eugenics and MKUltra projects. Marc is back solo this time with his beautiful and wonderful spouse, Marina, and we are going to dive a little deeper into Marc's story, as well as talk about the surprising origins of Project Paperclip and eugenics, and the history behind what came to be known today as MKUltra and the people involved in it. You're also going to get the great honor of listening to Marc talk more about his testimony at SRI and his personal experiences being used in the MKUltra projects for 13 years. It's an honor to listen to a survivor speak their hardest truths, and their testimony are things all of us need to hear and know to understand the world we live in and the history of how we got here. It's only when we understand the patterns of the past that we can break the old ways and start anew. Our children deserve better futures, and it's only with survivors like Marc who are brave enough to share their hard truths that we can begin to weave together a new tapestry for the future. One where we prioritize keeping children safe and passing down generational love instead of generational trauma. And I always say that spouses are the unsung heroes of a survivor's healing journey, and to have Marina's unique perspectives as a support system for Marc is invaluable. She's also done extensive research herself to understand what happened to Marc, and together they contribute a massive piece to this puzzle we are all amassing together with each survivor testimony about these crimes that are still being carried out on children today that date back to the beginning of time. This is an episode you will be learning a lot from, so grab a pen and paper, turn whatever you are doing off, and give Marc and Marina your full attention. Before I finish introducing this week's guests, I wanted to give a quick reminder that if you are a survivor whistleblower who wants to share your story on the podcast, or who wants to share any information privately with me, you can now email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. Please send me a briefing of who you are and how I can support you, whether it's through podcasting or sharing information. I also recently started a Substack that I'd love to have your support on that you can find at www.emmacatherine.substack.com. I have been doing weekly recaps and insights on my podcast and using this as a place to publicly journal my journey as an advocate for our children. My Rumble channel is also now up and running, and I'd love your support on that platform, and all my other social, email, and project links can also be found in the show notes. As always, I'm beyond grateful for all the ways you guys show up and support the show and the incredible guests featured. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming our guest of honor today, SRI and MKUltra survivor, hero for the children, an absolute warrior, Marc Victor, and his hero and beautiful warrior of a spouse, Marina Louw. Thank you guys so much for being here with me today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Last time that you guys were on, we had a really beautiful discussion reuniting Frida, Ariadne, and you, Mark, and Marina, you there for support and all the amazing things that you contributed. And I wanted to bring you back, Mark, because I think you have such a deep understanding of how this works through your research and experience. And then also having Marina here to help corroborate your story and talk about some of her insights being on the outside and going through all of this with you. And Mark, you're so well studied in the history of all of this. And I thought that would be a really important thing that you could talk about today, is that history, because a lot of people even today that know about MK Ultra still don't know the history, and we're certainly not taught it in, any type of academia, what actually happened here in America that was brought over from Germany, and just all the different ways that this has infiltrated our society. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. I'm happy to start wherever you want. I know, Mark, you wanted to talk about pieces of your testimony. Marina, I know you have some great insights. So I figured I would just hand it over to you guys, and we'll dive into this and have a great discussion about it.
What do you want me to start with?
What we just spoke of.
Oh, okay. Yes, for me, it's all good and well about the history of MK Ultra, which Mark will talk about fully.
But applying it to real life.
Yeah, applying it to real life is a total different story, because people think, after our previous talk, he was in MK Ultra as a child from 3 to 15, 14, anyway,
Yeah,
for 13 years. But you would think, okay, it stops after 13 years, but it never stops. And even it was a major influence in his life after that, being sent for further advanced hypnosis and stuff like that. But in his adult life, Mark waited so long to get married because he wasn't sure if he could handle it. Because he didn't know what the hell is going to happen in his life, because he was being taken away all the time. As we said, he would disappear for 3 months, 4 months, sometimes weeks. You don't know when it's going to happen or how long. Coming back, he wasn't able to explain where he was. So as you said, how do you explain to an employer, or even when he had his own business later, which was not the solution, how do you explain to the people? He was in construction, in the middle of a house, you're building for somebody, you disappear, you come back, your crew is gone, your tools is gone, your truck is gone, everything you had is gone. It's stolen, or it's been there for 3 months. Your rent was paid, your dogs were fed, but you were not there. You see it in your bills, you see it in everything around you. In the work situation, no, it's not a dream. It's not that he imagined it. It happened. And also he was followed for years and years and years of his life. And even as recently as a few years ago, when I was in his life, we've been followed. And it is just something you never get rid of, and something you cannot freely talk about because of this crazy bloody story. People think you're crazy. People think you're lying.
They'll pull you aside and tell you you're a liar, and use the Torah, which is a teaching tool for the Jewish faith of how to be a good citizen. They'll use a Torah script to shame you, where that Torah script is supposed to be in the privacy of a rabbi, challenging you on a truth that they've proven is, that you lied.
Yeah.
But the problem with it is people will accuse somebody of lying without investigating what they've said at all.
But besides that, what's more important is Mark has 2 beautiful daughters. They are in their 20s now, but how do you explain to your children, listen, this is what happened to me? And the story of telling, through all this, you actually tell people, I might have multiple personalities because that's what they try to do to me. I can't say Mark are different people. He has 4 or 5 personalities. To me, he's Mark. But, or how would you say Mark? It's always this joke between us, the accent, my South African accent. It's so different from yours, but it's actually interesting between us. We always laugh. But yeah, so it's far-reaching. It goes on and on. You're never rid of this. It never stops. It hasn't stopped. There's no sound.
Oops, my bad. I had it on mute. I was gonna say, could you give any more examples about that for people on specific times when there was missing time that were very important times in your life?
No, that's you.
Excuse me.
Start with the first time. When was that?
I was on in a C-130 cargo plane, and Oliver North was stealing military equipment.
Can you tell that?
In Arkansas. We ended up going from the military base back to Mena, Arkansas International Airport that was donated to the United States by Ross Perot, who was hip deep in Iran-Contra, along with Oliver North and a number of other people. That was the first time.
How long was that, more or less? Do you know?
This couple months.
But that's also the time he started remembering, hey?
No, I remember
knowing the difference between being gone. Yeah, I know you remember all of it, but I mean, what was actually going on while you were away, while you were taken, isn't it?
Yeah, but I really don't want to talk about those right now.
That's fine. No pressure too. No pressure.
It's actually really, if you tell everything, it's going to be very, very sensitive information. Absolutely. That might not be safe.
I'll tease you with a little bit. How do you handle a gigantic, muscle-bound special forces warrior crying for his mother when he's burning alive?
Yeah, that was one of his experiences, in this thing he's talking about.
How do you get that out of your head?
You come to your senses and you're in a field somewhere with people burning around you. Something happened and here you are. And actually, can I say about the other person? He was another person in these away phases. But he didn't really, he was certainly called another name, and then he realized, oh, it's me they're talking to. And he didn't know what the hell to do because he was Mark then.
Think of it.
Not the other one.
You're on a mission and everybody's calling you by a different name. You don't know where you're supposed to be standing, what you're supposed to be doing. And that's when they didn't release me after that.
Yeah. But that was when, in your way later years.
That was.
When was that, more or less? What age were you?
That was 20s? In 1980.
Okay. Yeah.
And to give you a hint, it was in North Iran. But what I want to talk about today is the genesis of all of this. What caused all of this. And there's been hate throughout the history of mankind, but what happened in the 1800s is this silly little Scottish guy started reading Greek, writings. And what he was reading is what he called eugenics. The superior gened human. And in this eugenics format that would have manifested itself into small little pockets in the United Kingdom eventually being racist bastards, but without millions and millions of dollars of a gigantic mogul's fortune was spent, not only the money, but his energy into making eugenics an international movement. And I thought I was the eugenics expert of the world. And then I saw a movie called Sarajevo. And every fifth or sixth sentence, it's an anti-Semitic statement, and or the statement in the subtitles, are you a eugenicist? Which that term means it's a gigantic movement. And this is the genesis of Archduke Ferdinand's assassination, and how his own people had him set up so he didn't take power. And a lot of people don't know this, but Archduke Ferdinand had been in power previously. For some reason, he felt his life was in danger, so he resigned. So he's now about to take control of Yugoslavia again. And the one thing he intended to do was to give all the Yugoslavians the equal right and make a democracy out of Yugoslavia. So all of these people that the eugenicists viewed as subhuman, Archduke Ferdinand was going to give the voting rights to an equal rights in Yugoslavia. Well, those eugenicists really didn't like that too much. So that's the reason why they had Archduke Ferdinand assassinated, but that's only part of the reason. The vehicle of that assassination was supposed to lead into World War I in order to have a 6-week war where they would win, take over Yugoslavia, and put a railroad in from Baghdad to Berlin to bring the fuel that the Germans needed to take over the world. And I spoke lightly on it when we talked previously, that if the Germans had that fuel in World War I or World War II, they would have won the war. And we'd be all speaking German right now, or dead. So what ended up happening is that family's name is the Harriman family. And the Harriman family used to have the Eugenics Research Institute in a 13-story building in New York.
Marc, could you explain real quick for people just what eugenics is to you?
Eugenics is this what's called now a pseudoscience, and it was taught in every elementary school, junior high school, college, and university in the United States and most of the world. And you had to take your prerequisite course in eugenics or you didn't graduate.
Yeah, but give her an example of what it is.
So the core element of what eugenics is they called it a science at the time and they showed you the superior gened human and all of this other bull crap. So all the Nazis did, twisting eugenics, was replacing the Viking as the superior gened human and replacing it with the Aryan. So that's German,
It's all that Hitler stuff. And
it's all that interconnection. Yeah. So in the early 1900s, E.H. Harriman, the person who's famous for being the name used in the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, he was the guy inside the railroad car with all the money, wouldn't open the door because he said, if I open the door, E.H. Harriman's going to fire me. Well, it was true. And the person that hired the, you know, the professional investigator and to go after Butch Cassidy and Sundance in real life was hired by Harriman because he was tired of getting robbed by Butch Cassidy and Sundance. So Harriman was this big railroad tycoon. And one of the more famous things he's famous for under the eugenics format is the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, you know, at the end of, by Lincoln at the end of the war, which said the United States is never going to have slaves in the United States again. Sounds wonderful. So money was given to Harriman and all of the other big tycoons, the Stanfords, and all of the other people that participated in putting the Pacific Railroad in. Okay, well, they stole all the money. And they ended up going back to President Johnson, who replaced Lincoln when he was assassinated, and said, you know, we have this problem, you know, we don't have any more money. So President Johnson allowed them to enslave another race, exactly the opposite of what the Emancipation Proclamation states, you know, and allowed them to enslave people to get the railroad in, so these wealthy people didn't have to pay back the money they stole from the United States government. And this was all justified under the eugenics program. So every one of those towers, Hoover Tower at Stanford, that's in memoration of one of the profound eugenicists from Stanford, President Hoover. President Hoover is also the person who's responsible for the Federal Reserve. And the provision of our Constitution that states Congress is supposed to coin our money, that means Congress is supposed to be doing the job the Federal Reserve does. And the Federal Reserve, why is the Federal Reserve a privately owned company that up until when the Queen just died, she was a majority owner of the United States Federal Reserve? Help me with this. And President Hoover is responsible for that. Why? Because all of his, he was the puppet. E.H. Harriman had this cute saying, you know, he said, don't be the puppet, be the puppeteer. And what he meant by it, and he'd always explain afterwards, don't be the person in front of the podium, be the person who's pulling the strings of the person in front of the podium. So, you know, all of this goes back to this E.H. Harriman financing this crazy Scottish guy's discovery of hate, as if it's relevant in a world that wants to have international commerce and roads and fire, you know, stations and schools and the ability of voting rather than going and killing each village next door. You know, the idea of this nationalism is exactly the operating manual of eugenicists. You know, that they don't want to be an international body. They don't want to find a win-win business deal between one business or another or one country or another. You know, under the Trump mindset, it has to be a profound win. And here's the scary thing. Fred Trump was arrested promoting a race riot in New York City. This particular riot, a black man was killed. Why is it that Fred Trump got out from under being tried for that murder, since he was responsible for creating that race riot? And Fred Trump, interestingly enough, made a lot of his money through Brown Brothers and Harriman. Now, all of these people are interconnected to the Skull and Bones, and primarily at Yale. But to think it's just Yale is delusional, because Yale's a carbon copy of the Skull and Bones from, take a wild guess, Berlin. All of this goes back to Germany and German hate, and how they justified it because they were superior. And just like cattle, you have to manage your cattle. And they compared Jews and gypsies and anybody that was not them to as an inferior animal that needs to be managed.
I was going to ask, do you know what they were measuring that on? How would they dictate superior and inferior?
Oh, okay, case in point. A backwoods survival guy atypically isn't going to have international, economics as his educational base. He's going to be a profound genius on an IQ test that asks questions about surviving in the wilderness. So imagine you're a 163 IQ person and you crash in a car with a survivalist. That's going to be the smartest, excuse my language, motherfucker on the planet, as that person's getting you out of that bad situation. The moment you get back to society, that guy's going to be a village idiot again. So it's everyone. The IQ test was developed at Stanford University. It based the questions you're being asked on white history. Now imagine you're growing up in a cultural, Latino, community or a Latino family. You're not going to know the nuanced stuff that white people are taught at the dinner table. You're going to be taught your own history, your own cultural history. So if that IQ test isn't based on something that's relevant to everybody, now the tests are relevant. And now there's not one IQ test, there's 60 different categories of IQ tests.
But what is it that they viewed as the superior race that they had to use?
They had the IQ test was just it was developed to justify the point of who is superior and who is inferior. Here's a funny thing to anecdote it.
The white IQ.
There was a whole bunch of, about 5 years ago, a whole bunch of computers, mostly laptops, that were sent in this big box to this tribe in Africa. There were no manuals. The teachers had no idea how to make them work at all. And the teachers ended up having a conference to try to figure out what they were going to do with these laptops that were worthless. And 4 hours later, they came back and the kids had already figured out how to get online with them. So, so trying to apply anything as a mathematical formula to measure people in a simplistic manner is going to give you the end result you want. If you want to look at somebody as a lesser human being, it's very easy to create a scenario. Just look at all the propaganda that the Nazis used, as that evil Jew with the dreadlocks and the big nose and done as a caricature, stealing all your money. And you breed that from a very young age. Here's something relevant right now that same thing is happening. Vladimir Putin is putting machine guns in the hands of 2- and 3-year-olds. So 20 years from now, there'll be those crazy warriors that'll do anything. It's pre-programming your people. And
that's eugenics.
And to touch on MK Ultra, the reason why it's obvious that nobody is going to give up a nuclear weapon as a country, because that's a bargaining chip. That makes you powerful in more ways than just military. So if MK Ultra was the most classified top secret program in the history of top secret programs, that wouldn't be shredded because the Senate was going to do a public hearing on it. Just look at the disinformation that Trump uses, and the CIA could have used the same damn formula because they're the ones that made it and more sophisticated. And by coming up with a term as something as simple as conspiracy theory, those words are taught to disarm. But if you go back to all of those skull and bones situations, like Alan Dulles, the person who was put as the first CIA director after the OSS.
What's the OSS?
The occupation, OSS is the occupational streets. Say it, I can't say the word. Occupational Strategic Service.
Strategic Service, okay. Yeah.
So, and who was the person who was in essence in charge of the OSS before it was switched to the CIA? Alan Dulles. Well, how does Alan Dulles connect into all of this? Oh, he's a skull and bones brother of Averill Harriman. Well, wait a second. Is he the only Dulles that is? No, his brother John Dulles, the person who was the attorney for the OSS and the CIA, was also a skull and bones brother. 90% of all of the people in key positions in the United States government during World War I and World War II, from the Department of Defense, the Department of Navy, the Department of the Air Force, all of these key people were members of that skull and bones crew. And I can prove it. If the prerequisite to go into flight school is a college degree, how did George H.W. Bush get to go in the Air Force for flight training, even though he hadn't graduated from high school? And why all of a sudden didn't he graduate from high school? Because there was a hazing murder at his prep high school. And all of a sudden, George H.W. Bush was sent away to flight school to get him out of there. And interestingly enough, the dean of that prep high school all of a sudden became one of the undersecretaries of one of the defense departments. Now, how does a principal of a high school qualify being an undersecretary of defense? Help me with this.
He's a Freemason.
You know, it's a complete game, and all these silly goofball QAnon nuts are over just making themselves look like asinine fools, looking for this world takeover, where it's been right in front of your stupid ass the whole damn time. Now, ask me if I think they're still in charge. Probably not. But there's a visible example right there that you guys are so fucking stupid that you're all of a sudden standing at you know, the school book depository waiting for John Kennedy to all of a sudden poof out of, you know, a fig leaf or whatever. You know, and talk about throwing your integrity down a toilet. I mean, my God, there's real life things that need to be fixed in this country, and we need both parties and a lot of people to start talking about it and start confronting politicians to start making better choices. Because once again, all of this comes back to, like I was neurotically saying last time, the inspector generals, and there has to be a better system for inspector generals to do their jobs and not be thwarted by inside, you know, takeovers.
And speaking of that, Mark, so after the inception of SRI and these programs that came to Stanford, who was the original crew? Like, what doctors or scientists, who were, I know Joseph Mengele. Is there anybody else that you know of that was at the time?
What I can tell you from fact, and I don't talk about, you know, things I don't have factual knowledge about, but what I can tell you is that during World War II, there were correspondence, and these things can be found online, correspondence between the president of Stanford, Terman, and Lewis Terman, and before World War II, the correspondence was as cute as, oh, look at so-and-so in Germany. We've just sterilized 56,000 people in the last 6 months. We're way ahead of you. And then the person from Germany would all of a sudden say, well, we just killed off all of our handicapped and disabled people. We're one up on you, you know, and ultimately, obviously, the Germans won the one up by killing the Jews so profoundly. But here's an interesting question. Unless the Harriman system was so profoundly in place, how did those correspondents get across enemy lines? Think of it. There was no mail system to your enemy you're at war with. So those correspondents had to be snuck in there under the treasonous enemies that were helping the Germans, which once again, we have to touch on Averell Harriman, E.H. Harriman's son, who took over when he died in 1907 or 1909. Union Bank was started so the Thyssen Industries in Germany wouldn't have his money all tied up and frozen when Germany went to war with other countries. So Union Bank was a vehicle to keep him in a nice money flow when Germany went to war with the rest of the world. And who was the president? Who was the CEO of Union Bank once again? Averell Harriman. Who was the president? The president of Union Bank at that time was George H.W. Bush's father, Prescott Bush. All of those assets were frozen. They were going to be indicted at any time. Here's a confusing thing. They never were indicted. And after the war, after World War I and World War II, all of the assets were given back to these people. After World War I, the steam line that went to Germany and back to the United States was given to the Harrimans. The only person that was allowed to do trading with Germany were the Harrimans. Who was the person who was responsible for creating economic instability in Germany so the Nazis could take a hold of the power in Germany? The Harrimans created such instability in Germany, such inflation, that's how the Germans got 23% of the vote during the 32 election, and that got them into power. And then the moment that they were the under party of the two parties that came together to make enough vote to get 50%, because when you have multiple parties, the winning party has to have 50%. So you end up having to make a coalition with another party, just like in the United Kingdom, just like in Israel, just like in France. So what ended up happening is the gentleman who won the election, I can't remember his name at the moment, but what ended up happening is he didn't have 50% vote. So he had a choice of aligning himself with the Communist Party or the Nazi Party. He chose the Nazi Party. A week later, Hitler had his henchmen kidnap I think it was the Kaiser's son, and was told, your son's going to be dead unless you advocate the power to us. And that's how Hitler ended up taking power in Germany with 24% of the vote. He gangstered up. Then he burnt down his parliament building a week after that and blamed it on the communists that he'd already started killing before the parliament building was killed, before the parliament building was burnt. You know, these are all things that I'm not going to name the director of photography, but his name is Kevin. I won't use his last name. Kevin was going to do a project with me years ago. And I went in, and the guy has got won more awards than, most people on this planet. He told me about a video that he filmed of Donald Trump in the 80s and talking about Adolf Hitler like he was getting sexually aroused by him, about how charismatic he was and all this other crap. And I asked Kevin to release that video in 2016, and he refused to, because he said, if I release this video, he'll know who released it and he'll sue me. He still hasn't released it because he's a gutless bitch. And it's those type of people that look at the people that are influencing the Supreme Court, that have all of this Nazi paraphernalia and books signed by Adolf Hitler that they've spent millions of dollars on. And this isn't confusing one of the parties in this country. We're talking about history repeats itself if you're too frickin' stupid to learn from it. Learn how successful nationalism has been in the history of mankind. Look at it, where hate gets you. And look at, you have a joyous child that you put all of your energy into training to hate. Does that sound as sick as it does it coming out of my mouth to you? As these things are so freaking sad, that this is how people, and realize money and power are so intertwined, and they're more addictive than heroin. And people that advocate hate to get power are the one persons on this planet that should never have power. And it all gets back to hate. And it all gets back to the formula and the success rate of using hate. For instance, anytime somebody leads with just talking about a problem without talking about their solution for that problem, and they're telling you who to blame for your lot in life, that person is using hate as a vehicle to make you think like a donkey's ass. Because if everything that's happened in my life, I have had to willingly take responsibility for. I wasn't able to overcome what they did to me. I know other people that have had a hell of a lot. A boy cried because he had no shoes until he saw a boy that had no feet. There's always people in a hell of a lot worse situation, and that's the vehicle that we're supposed to use to rise up. I should have been able to overcome this. Just like all of these other people have to own their own mistakes. You know, you don't blame other people for your mistakes. You don't blame other people for not getting the raise. You don't blame the Latin person over there for getting the promotion because he's Latin. You know, you go and you work harder. You study harder. You learn you learn a better way of doing things, so you get the damn promotion the next time, or you go to a company that values you more.
You're absolutely right. Can you talk about, you were at Stanford for 13 years, you said, right?
From 1957 to 1969.
Where was everything that you did there, or did they have you in different locations? Like, what did that look like?
Have you ever heard of S4E2 Institute?
No, I don't think so.
S4E2 Institute is about 30 miles south of Carmel, on the coast. Okay, they have thermal hot springs that are just coming right out of the earth.
Big sip.
Sounds like it smells like rotten eggs. Okay, that was founded by the same people that were promoting LSD be used in MK Ultra at Stanford University. Oh, wait a second. What do they call themselves? Oh, a mind development center. Kind of like the mind development that they're doing in MK Ultra. Huh? So yes, we went to S4E2 Institute a numerous amount of times. When I was at Highfields Farm, we went there at least 12 times in 9 months. Yes, there's a lot of interconnection between outside facilities. Like, for instance, why in the world was Lockheed, their missile testing plant, right next door to Hewlett-Packard's Mountain campus? And what in the hell does Hewlett Packard electronics company that just started up Nita Mountain campus for. Well, let's see, a lot of MK Ultra field tests were done there. I almost killed a kid with a rock 3 times the size of a softball, and I was swinging at his head like it was a marble. Why did it take 600 pounds of men, 3 men, the way to combine 600 pounds? Why did it take that many men to control a 60-pound kid?
How old were you?
I was probably 8, 9.
That was, tell her where it comes from. It was after shock therapy and stuff.
What happened is that they get you to break into multiple personalities by giving you, now what we perceive as LSD now is about 40 times less potent than what they gave us. It was like a supercharged version of LSD. So you would be bouncing off of walls and actually believing you were flying, and I mean, insane stuff. So they would give us the LSD, they'd put us on an electroshock table, and they'd shock us into a secondary personality that they would create, and then they'd pre-program that personality with subliminal programming. And like I said last time, I was completely shocked that they could teach a physical motion, martial arts, in subliminal programming that you're seeing in your subconscious. And I know that sounds sillier than crap, but if you really think about it, that's spooky.
But finish the story about the programming and the kid with the rock. What happened there?
Well, they ended up taking me away from there in a rage state, and the hypnotist had to bring me back into my own personality. And after that day, it's just, they call it bleed over, where they keep testing you to see if, you know, there's bleed over from the real personality to the created one, and or the created one to the real personality. So they're constantly testing you on that. And from that moment on, I was terrified that they could push a switch and turn me into a Marina, you had a perfect analogy a couple of weeks ago, turn me into a programmable drone.
What happened is he was shocked and so on, and put into a rage state by telling him, oh, the people are laughing at him, that kid is laughing at him. That kid was way bigger than him. So
the one thing you don't want to do with me is maliciously laugh at me.
or just innocently.
No, it's when somebody is right after that incident at Hewlett Packard's Mountain campus, when they were shocking me, saying, you know, the people in the other room are laughing at you, and they wanted me to just jump into that rage state to want to go kill them. And when I wouldn't do that, they'd shock me again. And when I wouldn't do what they told me to do, they'd shock me again. And that to me is the only semblance of being a hero I am, is because I thought I beat them.
Yeah, but
by not allowing him to turn me into a monster, yet I ended up on missions.
But Marc tends to meander when he tells a story. So let me finish your story. When you jumped on the kid, he was way smaller than the other kid, and he was hitting him with this rock over and over. And it took 3 adults to keep him off this kid. And that was the moment that you realized about how you were able to kill someone on command, you know.
It's just like that. And this superhuman power is just triggered on the spot, and it's nauseating. You feel empty inside directly afterwards, because I think you go into an energy drop, because all this adrenaline is so quickly. And I think it's part of what they were giving me. They changed my chemistry. I was doing a genetics research study. I was one of the people involved in it years and years ago at the University of Washington, and now they deny ever doing this research study. Weird. And the end result was the lady, the nurse, told me that my chemistry was completely different. And she said, and she asked me questions, if I have a different reaction to everybody when I drink alcohol, or when I smoke pot, or when I drink coffee. And like, for instance, I drink coffee and I go to sleep. Every reaction a normal person gets from those things that I just named, I get a complete opposite reaction. I can't take drugs. Half of the problems with my body now are the side effects from all the drugs that the doctors gave me to fix something. So my entire chemistry is different.
Like an antidepressant that.
Yeah, doctor gave me an antidepressant to get over, I had cancer. And the Prozac ended up putting me into organ seizures. So all my organs were just going into seizure, and my intestines, you have ligaments that hold your intestines in place, and they're attached to your ribs and other places. All my intestines tore away all the ligaments, so they don't have attachments anymore, and they just float around.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Now, when you say you were programmed to kill whenever you realized that, was that happening at SRI, or was that up in the Hewlett-Packard part of the park? Where were they doing this?
The hypnotism and all that, the lab work was mostly done at Stanford Research Institute, but occasionally we were being tested at the University of California, Santa Cruz, right? Which is just right over the hill. And some of the bleed over testing was done at Sisters Hospital, was in Santa Cruz, right on the cliffs of Santa Cruz, overlooking the bay right there. When it moved to the hospital that's now called Dominican Hospital, in some portables right next to the existing hospital, we were being tested for our bleed over there. So we were being tested in multiple places. So it was more than just Stanford Research Institute, but it was mostly Stanford Research Institute.
And did you work with Dr. Mengele at all? Dr. Green, Joseph?
Dr. Mengele was one of those people that were the other party that was corresponding with Terman. And I'm 100% convinced that the heavy mustached man driving a Morgan that was driving me to this summer camp was Dr. Mengele, and the person spoke in a heavy German accent, and he looks absolutely identical to Dr. Mengele at this time, and he went by the name of Dr. White. I saw that Dr. White numerous times, maybe 5-6 times over 13 years. I've been told that he spent most of his time in Argentina. So anybody that's saying that he's full-time here or there is probably full of shit. And if he was going to one facility for MK Ultra and realized he was doing mind control experiments in Auschwitz, and the facility that Auschwitz was built on, he had been doing experiments before it was a concentration camp.
But you never knew, oh, this is Dr. Mengele.
No, so anybody that tells you anything about Mengele more than they're pretty sure that this person is Dr. Mengele is not working on absolute fact. So do I think it's Dr. Mengele? 100%.
So he's a chameleon.
But I'm not going to say it because I don't have any proof.
I've heard that from a few people that Dr. White was a name that they had to call him too. So that seems to be similar from a lot of survivors.
It bothers me that other people say Dr. Green because I know it 100% Dr. White because I attached it to the white Morgan that the guy was driving.
Maybe it was Dr. Blue at some other places. You know, it seems like he was into colors.
Yeah.
No.
You know?
No, that'd be too difficult. You know, lying is impossible. And the more layers you add on top of those lies, it's just creating an absolute impossibility. So in my mind, logic only dictates that you make things simple. And for instance, you know, it's science initially poo-pooed away women's intuition.
Yes.
Would you be shocked that a number of universities have corroborated studies that have shown women actually have that ability, and so do men? But I think that the testosterone kind of washes away the common sense.
Oh my gosh. No, you're right though. There's been so much that's been wiped away from our textbooks in school. You know, we have this watered down version of trauma, of what we're capable of the truth of history. You know,
look at woke. Look at this silly woke crap where we don't want to own what we did to a minority. Well, we've done it to a whole bunch of minorities. You know, the only country in the history of mankind that's had profound genocide against a culture is the white race of this country. Now, are there other countries? Yes. But let's just talk about our country. What do you think? Why do you think blankets, soiled blankets with diseases were traded to Indian tribes? Because then all the Indians are dead and you don't have to sign a treaty with them that they didn't sign to begin with. Most treaties never were signed by Native Americans. And the white side would, when they were supposed to give a whole bunch of meat to the tribe to not hunt, they were given rotten meat. Now you have a choice. Are you going to go hunt and keep your tribe alive, or are you going to eat the rotten meat and die? Well, our wonderful Abraham Lincoln decided to pardon one 17-year-old and hung the other 190.
Of what?
The Crow were about to win their tribal land back, and Teddy Roosevelt came up with this great idea that if he made their reservation that they were about to win in the white man's court, if he made it a national park, then it would have to be undone by 60% of Congress agreeing on something. That national park is Yellowstone National Park. That's the ancestral homeland of the Crow Nation, my brothers. And it was stolen because of lies and manipulations by Teddy Roosevelt. Do you know the teddy bear is named after Teddy? You know why? The motherfucker shot and killed the mother bear, but then was nice enough to spare the baby. And they called it Teddy Bear. He killed the mother and spared the baby. Who, side note, the baby died days later because his mother wasn't there to feed it. So to say that we're supposed to forget and pretend in fantasy land that racism wasn't done on the Native Americans and the African Americans, and that the African Americans, were actually learning a skill instead of being enslaved. What, 50-60% of those Black people that came over to America died in the holds of ships. And they were doing it under their own free will to get training. Oh my God. You know, the delusion and the bullshit that comes out is the exact same stuff that desensitizes people and gets eugenics as part of our prerequisite to go to school. Just imagine how a Jew feels having to take a eugenics class to get a college degree or to graduate from high school. Did you know that in the 1800s, the Jewish rabbis had to sign an agreement to not convert people in the United States to be allowed to stay? Does that sound like democracy to you, or race hate? It's the reason to this day that Jews don't convert people to Judaism in the United States. Does that sound like you're free to practice any religion you want? When Donald Trump bans Muslims from this country, is that not hate? You know, Martin Luther King said, measure every person by their own content of character, not the color of their skin. You know, there's a saying out there that African Americans love America more than America loves them. They choose to stay here. They're the ones that built Washington, D.C. and every building in the United States up until the 1940s. They want to be part of this country. It's the reason why they dress better than everyone else and they talk better than everybody else, because they have to be more perfect, and that's not fair. That's race hate.
Can I jump in here? Emma, I don't know if you wanted to ask this question, but I knew
I think it's important to apply eugenics to modern day.
Yeah.
So people see the profundity of not valuing that person.
No,
You know the beautiful thing about African Americans? You ask them a question, they're going to give you an answer because they don't care if you respect them or not. They respect themselves.
That's not what I'm talking about. I just think we skipped the part where about Operation Paperclip and how they got here. Okay. And how Nazis start actually here.
The reason why Operation Paperclip was so seamless and so painless is the United States government had a profound relationship with these same people before World War II. So when you're corresponding with another scientist that's in your specialty in Germany, you know, before World War II, isn't that the obvious person you're going to advocate the government bring over during Operation Paperclip? Is that astronomer that's doing the same thing that you're doing, or that electronics person that's doing the same thing you're doing? So these people already had pre-based relationships in the United States. A lot of the funding was a majority of the funding of the Nazi Party building those manufacturing plants that were secretly building up their military against the armistice that they signed at the end of World War I, was funded by American government, American funding through the Harriman funnel, funneling the money to it. Because remember, after World War I, the Harrimans had complete control of trade going into Germany. So they were in charge of everything. And the fact that they end up getting everything back at the end of World War I and end of World War II is sickening to me. The statute of limitations for releasing the documentation showing who was in bed with the Nazis, it was supposed to be like 2013 or something like that in the 70s. And every time we get close to those documents being released, all of a sudden that date gets extended up into the future. And the only reason that can be is the people that would be named in those documents are still in power. You know, and I'll guarantee you that it was more than the Queen of England's uncle the ex-king of England that was in bed with the Nazis. You know, Goebbels was coming over and flying over in that little tiny airplane to secretly rendezvous with the sympathetic British people that were sympathetic to the Nazi cause to help arrange a ceasefire. And that's the specific reason why the dude flew over here. And he ended up not landing well. You know, there's a lot of information, and we need to know that what happened during World War II. But what does it matter? Because these idiots that create this woke, you know, the only thing that woke tells me is they need to woke the fuck up. You know, creating some cliche rather than something that has meaningful information.
What is woke?
Woke is, educating people about what happened during this, what caused the Civil War. Here's something that people don't know. People think that the North had this moral compass and they were against slavery. The Victorian Britain and in France too, they showed that having indentured servants made you 4 times the money than having slaves. Because a slave, you have to raise until they're old enough to start working, which is about 6 or 7, right? And then by the time they're 20, they're so broken down, they're disabled, and you have to pay for their housing and their food their entire life until they die. Versus an indentured servant who has to rent a house from, in essence, the slave owner, who has to buy their food from the slave owner, and every month is more and more in debt. And the moment that that person's not working anymore, he can't afford food or housing. So that's the reason why the North had a business model that the traditionalist Southerners couldn't grab a hold of because they were so accustomed to have slaves. But here's the ultimate con job. I call it the greatest sales job in the history of mankind. All the Southern white people that didn't have a rich family that owned a plantation, they were unemployed. They didn't have any work. And why? Because all the work was being done by slaves. So if they had done away with slavery, those white dudes that were unemployed would have had a job. And the greatest con job in the mankind is the plantation owners convinced the people that they would not hire to go fight the war for them. And people in this generation have no clue, but imagine every 10 people that went to battle for the South, 9 of them died. And all of a sudden your company was reduced to nothing. So then they had to take all of those 10%ers that survived and bring them together for another 10. And then the next battle, there was only 1 that survived from that. And you wonder why so many of the Southern warriors fled. Because they knew every battle that they had a very little chance of survival. You know, everything is so twisted around hate and blame, rather than taking responsibility for listening in class and taking notes and valuing what the teachers are saying as a gift from God. Somebody's willing to open up their mind and give you a shortcut to be able to learn faster, be able to do a job better. That's what I call stealing knowledge. Taking responsibility for not passing that test for yourself. And why? Because you should have done your homework the week before you end up cramming it at the last minute.
I'm sorry to bring you back, but
bring me back, darling.
the paperclips, I call them the paperclips, that was in the valley. Those guys that went, because that's where the first lot of them went, or a lot of them went. It's to where you
it was such a quagmire because Wernher von Braun was being sought by the Soviet Union, by the Polish government, by the Czechoslovakian government, by the French government, and the German government. after World War II, because he was a war crimes criminal. You know, they wanted him at The Hague. They wanted him to stand trial. A number of other people tried to advocate that their assets, like Barbie, the Butcher of Leon. That guy was a paperclip, an Operation Paperclip Nazi. He was dishing information, mostly that he made up, about the Soviet Union, because one of his jobs working for the Nazis was doing intelligence in the Soviet Union. So Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Leon, was given a job by the CIA because they perceived he had assets. Well, you know, the Soviet Union, I despise them more than anything, but the Soviet Union got Nazis, scientists, got Nazi everything. And they worked for the Soviet Union, but they lived in a concentration camp. They lived in a gulag. They weren't given a beautiful house in a redwood forest and an idyllic environment where they could reinvent themselves and not have to pay the cost of being a war criminal and killing millions of people. Werner von Braun knew, he pretended like it wasn't his job. He knew every day another Jew was going to be hung out in front of his manufacturing plants that were in caves at this time. He didn't argue that they should stop killing the Jews, because he knew that every Jew that was hung got the rest of the Jews working that much harder.
But they lived mostly in Ben Lomond.
They lived in Ben Lomond and Love Creek Road. Doesn't that sound wonderful? And Love Creek Road.
That's where Marc lives. And
that's where I live. And there was a Nazi that lived right above us who knew we were Jewish and used every anti-Semitic thing known to mankind thrown at me. Well, being the uppity Jew I am, I threw apples at him and told him to fuck himself. And didn't feel bad at all a month later when they found him dead, and his rotten corpse had been dead all along, and his drinking buddies, you know, were the ones that found him.
But Marc didn't kill him.
No, and I didn't kill him. He died of a heart attack.
Marina.
And then the other Nazi on the other side of us, my mother and I watched die through our 8-foot fence. He had a heart attack, and we watched him die trying to take his nitroglycerin pills. And it was one of the more ghastly things, watching a human being turn purple and then falling over dead. You know, but these are just Nazis that were just placed in an environment where you didn't have a shoulder of the road. And if there was a shoulder of the road, you'd stick out like a sore thumb, like a day glow color. Because, you know, everybody that lives on all of those roads, they have someplace to park their car.
Right.
Marc went to school with these kids, you know, and yeah, you were the only.
I'm considered my hero from the San Lorenzo Valley is Neil Clark. And Neil Clark, I talked to a number of years ago, and he's out of the blue. He said, "Well, you just enjoyed fighting." Now, I didn't make any retort to him, but here's the retort. Not one of those fights. There's only one fight in my entire life I started. That was beating up the husband and wife that were raping my 13-year-old sister. Funny they didn't call the police. But every day I would have to go through a gauntlet of fights. And it wasn't one, it was 2 and 3. And, you know, if you're going to commit yourself to fighting, you might as well be. My nickname was the Taz, for the Tasmanian Devil. Because when you're going to fight, you have to commit yourself to it.
And so what would they do? They would have you fight other children, or could you talk about that specifically?
Yeah. Well, I told you about one of the cute scenarios of the bigger brother having me, you know, fight. But a number of people would, right in front of me, they'd be inspiring their son to just come kick my ass. And then there would be 2 brothers that were trying to kick my ass. And I didn't stand there and wait for them to initiate. If somebody is already calling a fight out, I'm going to take your head off. And you take the baddest of the group, you take them out, and all of a sudden the weaker links all of a sudden start reevaluating their motivation.
They didn't realize they were fighting an MK Ultra person.
And here's the funny thing. Their fucking
stronger.
parents are the ones that made me.
Yeah.
You know, all of these parents worked at Stanford Research Institute.
What else can you tell us about Stanford? I really want people to understand what took place and the fact that this is still happening. You know, we're so not
remote viewing. Well, here's the current. I told you last time that I saw a lot of MK Ultra testing going on in photographs with modern electronics.
In SRI.
No, this is what I found online, and it is not. They're dark-skinned Latin people, and like I said before, you know, the news would report, you know, how wonderful that this organization brought this medical facility to this little village that never had medical facilities before, and that they're vaccinating all of these people. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. But on the side note, you can go back and you can see that in the 80s, when was MK Ultra supposedly stopped in the United States? 76. So in the 1980s, all of a sudden, little children are disappearing. They're accusing Americans of kidnapping them to steal them to be their children, you know, in America. And what I think was going on is in those same facilities, they were kidnapping the kids for MK Ultra and taking them to a facility that nobody would know where it was at that point.
She wants to know about SRI, your experience in SRI.
Well, my experience in SRI is when that closed down, it had to start up somewhere else. And the same time, in 1976, the Inspector General's statement that can be found online is, why are we torturing our own people, inferring that it would be okay to do this program overseas when we're torturing somebody else's people.
But what did they do to you in SRI?
Well, I've already gone through that. Electroshock therapy, they developed remote viewing. I'm 100% certain that I wasn't killing people. And the reason why I'm certain of that is a vast majority of the training I was doing in the last 4 years was remote viewing and ESP type of things.
And what's remote viewing for people who might be new to that?
Well, you shut your eyes and you put yourself into a meditative trance and you try to visualize what's going on in the other room, or what's in the drawer next to you, or what's somebody's password to get into their credit card. Go ahead.
He did that to me.
Did he get it right?
It was in the beginning when I started to know him. It was in the first month or two, and we were at the gas station or something, and he said to me, "Oh, your PIN number is this and this and this." And I said, "How did you know?" Because I still thought, "Oh, you know."
You got it right. Oh my gosh.
There was I was driving for Lyft to see if I could try to get over being around people, and it didn't work. But what I do every now and then, I profile the people that were in the car, and this one example was this guy that was dressed like this hippie and this girl that was dressed to the nines, and they were a married couple, and she and I said, you know, I occasionally do profiling and remote viewing. She goes, "Okay, smarty pants, tell us what we do for a living." And I said, "Well, he's in art, but he's not really in art." And I said, "You want to be him, but you just don't know how to be him, and you're an executive." And he turned out to be a museum director, and she turned out to be a lawyer.
Oh my gosh, were they shocked?
Or there was another time, this guy, where I'd get my welding done, down in Auburn, and this guy was ahead of me, and the welding guy was talking to me about my remote viewing, and the guy had his hands in his pockets and he was rocking back and forth, and he said, "Okay, well, profile me." And I said, "You're an airline pilot and an engineer," and it turned out that he was a just retired airline pilot and engineer. And his bottom jaw looked like it crashed onto a cement slab and broke into a million pieces when I told him that.
But they used people like Marc with a remote viewing, to see what was going to happen in situations.
They wanted to see if they could have a remote viewer on the battlefield to know what was going to be over the hill.
That makes sense, to sort of foresee the future in a sense and be able to have you see further than what the people could that were on the ground.
Yeah, sort of.
I was on one flight, and the sergeant of arms almost shot me for in the military. If you're going to jeopardize a mission, you're dangerous to the mission. So I ended up saying that this mission is doomed, and I'm not going to tell you what mission it is, but the lieutenant calmed the sergeant of arms down and told him that I was a remote viewer, I guess the easiest way of saying it. And the mission was sabotaged by somebody that was in an American uniform.
So you were right and they didn't believe you?
No, I ended up getting sent away to Wiesbaden and then sent to Arkansas. And then I'm not allowed to leave after that because they knew that both of my personalities had integrated into one, because the shocking of watching those men burn alive, they knew I wasn't Bob anymore. So they didn't know what to do with me.
But even today, still, I think these things sort of peter out as you grow older. But even till, still now, you would sometimes see things or see, I remote viewed this or that, and it's things that happened while I was in South Africa, about me. And I said, well, yeah, it did happen. But what you always say is, you never know when it's real or not. When I
have a panic attack all the time, and the reason is because I'll be watching the Mariner game and I'll just have a profound panic attack and turn the game off, and I show Marina. I said, I just turned the game off and I know that the Mariners are about to blow up, and when I'll turn the TV back on, half an inning after I turned the TV off, the Mariners blew up. Yeah. And that happens on a regular basis. And I fucking hate it. Apologize for swearing, but I hate it. You think it's a plus, it's not. Life is supposed to just happen.
Tell her about the thing with the plane that you saw crashing. That's a funny story, but that's a long ago story.
I called up King TV News and I said that there was this
a
million years ago, and said that this plane is going to crash, and the operator at King TV said, "Oh, where did it crash?" And I said, "I don't know. It happens in the future." And I click, she hung up on me. So the next day, all of a sudden, there's dozens and dozens of news reporters all over my property accusing me of blowing up this airplane. And they didn't know, and my late girlfriend saw me for the first time by being accused of blowing this airplane up. No. So years later, when I met her, she said, were you on TV being accused of blowing up an airplane? And I said, yeah, and they never came back and apologized when they found out it was a mechanical error. The engine blew up, and I don't remember the flight, but these amazing pilots controlled the airplane because the rear engine blew out the controls of the tail, and they were controlling the plane by using the motors on the wings to steer it. But obviously they can't get the plane in the proper, angles and everything to land. So they spiraled into a cornfield where half the people survived the plane crash.
But he saw,
and they made it into a movie. But those news reporters didn't come back, and that's the last time I ever said anything about remote viewing.
But you said you even saw the way the baby.
I keep, one of my nightmares is I keep seeing this lady crush her baby in her lap.
In that plane,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so the detail sometimes is
It's gruesome. It's like a horror movie.
astonishing. Yeah.
Especially because you're remote viewing things that aren't pleasant. It's not like you're seeing something really good that you're able to view. Like you're getting these remote views of these really tragic things that are going to happen.
Well, it'd be one thing if I could say, wow, Taylor Swift's concert was freaking awesome last night, and not have to go to it.
Right. Or, yeah, exactly. Yes. Yes. I know, but instead you're seeing crashes and just these horrible things. So they would use you for remote viewing, and obviously that was something that you could do. What else did they have you do there?
A lot of like odd stuff that doesn't make sense.
Like what?
Like visualizing, what do they call that where you're visualizing lowering your heart rate down? Biofeedback. Biofeedback is an offshoot of what they were learning in MK Ultra, because you have the ability of seeing in your mind your heart and slowing your heart rate down. And it's just one of the aspects of different things your brain can do. Like a basketball coach at Mercer Island High School, who's the greatest basketball coach of all times, Ed Pebble. He had this principle that if you can visualize yourself doing something physical in your mind, and not just visualize it, but put a picture frame around it, but not just a picture frame, but what kind of beating is on it, what kind of fluting is on it. So you're seeing it in 10K, the visualization is incredible. And he said, as soon as you're able to do that, you'll be able to do that physical activity. And after I graduated from high school, I wanted to compete internationally in Frisbee competition. And I wanted to learn how to spin the Frisbee on my finger. So I ended up gluing these little rings on the bottom of the Frisbee so my finger would stay in the middle, until I said, oh, I remember Ed Pebble's thing. So I visualized spinning the Frisbee and it's sticking to my finger. And by the time I could see it in my mind, I went and grabbed a Frisbee and spun it, and it stuck to my finger. Then all of a sudden I'm in a competition, and it turns out that left-handers spin the Frisbee the opposite direction than right-handers do. And the guy setting me up that I was competing against was a left-hander. And I all of a sudden realized that, oh no, I don't know how to do it with the left-handers. It won't, and I couldn't spin it because you had to react completely the opposite. So I sat on the sidelines for 5 minutes and visualized it. And I did well, but not as well as if I would have been practicing that a long time earlier. But visualizing is gigantically powerful. And those are offshoots from MK Ultra. So the amount of levels that it goes, I mean, radar was developed with the mapping of the mind that in a general sense is very, very similar to a radar system. So that's the reason why all of those entities that initiated coming to Stanford Industrial Park which SRI is part of, the first ones there were the Varian brothers. All of the doctorate students under the alpha eugenicist, Frederick Terman. You go and you look up the graduate students of Frederick Terman at the end of World War II. And those are all the companies that got black money to make all the electronics necessary to make MK Ultra happen.
And when you say mapping of the mind when it comes to radar, could you explain that? What do you mean by mapping of the mind for people who maybe never heard that?
Well, when they put all the sensors on your head, they want to know, if they poke you in on the left shoulder, where is that going to come up when they're scanning your brain? So they're trying to regionalize where everything is happening. When they give you a drug, they want to have the electronics to be able to see the effects that it has on the brain. So the amount of electronics involved in doing that and the science involved with doing that is close to the difficulty of making the atom bomb. And it's such a sister project to the development of radar. After World War II, radar was really important to start upgrading and getting more and more and more sophisticated. The Doppler radar that our weathermen use today is a complete offshoot of that funding for developing that radar years and years and years ago.
Wow.
And you want to have a cute conspiracy theory, figure out how the first radar system on Hawaii that detected the oncoming Japanese onslaught of planes. Why didn't the General Short actually unstack all of those airplanes and get them all in the sky? It's a question a lot of people would like to know, because it's one of those conspiracy theories.
What exactly is the story?
That the United States military had early warning that the Japanese were going to attack them, but they let them. Every other scenario, if the United States would have acted on that intelligence, their ships are out at deep sea, and when they get sunk, they sink to the bottom. And Pearl Harbor, they sunk in a shallow harbor so they could be refloated. Any other scenario, the United States Pacific Fleet is completely destroyed. Here's another sickening thing. The ship that brought over the arms to resupply the British during World War I, before the United States was in World War I, was secretly leaked out by the Secretary of Defense for the United States and the Secretary of Defense or that position in the United Kingdom. Secretary of Defense of the United States, who helped leak it out, was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He leaked out the ship and let everybody know that the arms were coming, so the ship would be sunk and the United States could use that as an excuse to get into World War I. And isn't it interesting, the same play was done by Franklin Delano Roosevelt to get us into World War II. Allowed an attack to happen to use as a vehicle to get to war. So it's manipulation comes in many different forms. And my favorite professor ever stated, don't vomit out what I teach you like everybody else does when they're walking out of a classroom. Question everything. Look it up. Challenge the teacher. I had a teacher, state that I was literally, he said, who's the smartest person in the class, Mark? I don't know if I said this the first time, but then knowing the answer, and I'm sure you've been asked a question by a teacher that you knew the answer, but you knew you weren't supposed to give it so he could make his point. Well, I answered, the person that gets the best score on the test, knowing that that wasn't the right answer. And he said, no, it's that pain in the ass student that keeps asking all those damn questions and gets the teacher so upset that they know that there's going to be 50 questions by that pain in the ass. And the teacher prepares the night before knowing that they're going to have to know the nuance of that topic. And then the teacher said, I'm talking about you, Mr. Victor.
He's still a pain in the ass.
No, it's just, you need to know the nuances to really understand a topic.
Yeah, you're right.
The cliche of knowing a little makes you dumber than knowing nothing is true.
Well, and
because you learn a little bit and then you think you know something and you base your facts on that. Just like me thinking the solution to getting fired by jobs because I disappear is starting my own company. That was worse than getting fired by the company. At least then I lost their tools.
So Marc, talk about getting out of SRI. How did that happen? And what was sort of the transition that you went through after that 13 years?
When you were 15.
After I went through the 13 years is when I started disappearing.
Since you were 15?
No, when I graduated from high school, I was completely confused how my mother put so much energy into having me join the military. And let me put it this way, I quickly got out of the Navy because they tried to reassign me to another country's military. And I'm not going to say what country, and I'm not going to say anything more than that. But when you sign up to join the United States military, there's no freaking way I'm going to be fighting for some other country. This is my country. You know, Jews are part of this country too.
But when is it when you went for the advanced?
In 1970, my mother moved me. We talked about this a little bit last week.
Yeah, but I mean, that was just after you were done with 13 years.
I thought for sure my mother was protecting me from MK Ultra by moving me away from Stanford up to Seattle, only to find out, like we said last time, that
Donald Dudley.
I can't. Dr. Dudley.
Donald Dudley.
I've had a stroke and I had to relearn to talk.
Yeah,
so.
It's okay. And so what was the
sometimes he doesn't get words and and then I don't get them either sometimes.
and it's one of those things that you go into the dentist and you can remember everything that happens in the dentist. You know, every time I went into this doctor's office, I could not remember anything that happened, you know, from the moment that I went into his private room. And
but you were still in school then, hey?
Yeah, I was still in high school then.
Yeah.
And the moment I got out of high school is when I started going on all these crazy things. It turned out that at the same time that I was being followed everywhere up in Seattle, as I was in high school, my best friend's father was a highfalutin top executive at Boeing, and that he was working in black projects, so his entire house was wired with microphones everywhere. So when I showed up in that scenario, the team that was following me is encountering the team that's following, you know, everybody in his family. And we thought this guy's mother was a witch, because everything that happened to us, to the nuance, she'd repeat to us when we get home.
Because
like, for instance, we left this, Fred and I got signed up for this basketball clinic. We cut out of there and went to Seward Park and was having a really good time. We get home to Fred's house. Fred's mom tells us, so which did you like more, the basketball camp and then she went into the detail of what we were doing at Seward Park, which means that somebody was following us so close that they could see us smoking a joint.
And tell her. Or what? How did she know?
So it's.
How did she know?
Well, yeah, the only way she knew is she was told by the FBI that were following her. Her husband, Mr. Cash, and
names.
He invented every landing gear on every plane known to mankind. You know, AWACS, the 747 originally with the flying saucer disc mounted to the back, which is an in-air radar system, right? Mr. Cashin was in charge of the entire program. He would go on an airplane and fly to the Philippines or Singapore in a papered off windowed airplane, and then come home most nights. And he would tell me, like this one time, Ronald Reagan is running against Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter just said some nuance about stealth technology. So I'm up here asking Mr. Cashin about stealth technology, and he keeps looking at me. And his nickname is Crash, right? He works on his 40 different lawnmowers and his 70 different grandfather clocks all the time. You know, he fixes my car. He's my father, even though I didn't have a father. So he won't answer me, and he keeps walking away from me. And he's walking away from me because he knows his entire house is wired up, and the FBI is listening to everything going on. And he finally just bursts out this generic explanation of stealth technology, and then walks away like I just insulted his daughter.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, that's the man who I stole his socket set. And he comes up to my house. He never comes to my house. And he said, Mark, let's go work on your Volkswagen bus, because he knew exactly where his socket set was. So he opens the engine compartment, grabs his socket set, and he goes, I'm just extremely disappointed in you, Mr. Victor. And I started bawling. And he said, I'll see you at dinner tonight. A year later, he said, you don't sell your integrity for $1 million. This is in 73, let alone a socket set. And then I all of a sudden realized that every stupid thing I had done before that, people are going to define me as that. And I started changing.
And so
unfortunately, the people that have already defined you are going to remember you as that jackass rather than the person you changed into.
For sure. And so whenever your mother moved you, what was the advanced training that you had to do? What was different than the training that you had before?
I think the level of well, I think
hypnosis.
I think that the hypnosis thing is the key element to it, because the University of Washington really was pretty much the experts at that time in hypnosis. The lady that I went to in the 80s to hypnotize me to, if I turned the crank to the speed of the music I was listening to on my headphones, you know, that the pain would go away. The second time I went to get hypnotized by the lady, she refused to hypnotize me, and she said, people have been in there before and I'm not going in there again. And how many people refuse to take your money? And her education was at the University of Washington, and my theory is that she was part of being trained by Dr. Donald Dudley, who originally was a professor teaching at the University of Washington.
But you were these hypnosis sessions last for what, 2 or 3 years, eh? Was a long time.
Yeah, it was like 3 years that I went to Dudley, from when I was a sophomore until I graduated from high school.
So that's after the 13 years, is that for
Yeah.
it? So actually, it wasn't 13 years, it was way more than 13 years.
And here's a fact about hypnotism. They say that, you know, you'll never do anything under hypnotism that you wouldn't do under, you know, your normal conscious self. That's such a lie. Go online and look up Dr. Silver. He did this study that was all filmed. And what it is, he brought over a couple hundred people in for this weekend experiment and hypnotized them and tried to get them to do things, and whittled all these people down to these 4 profoundly hypnotizable people. They put them into this tub that was filled with nothing but ice, and hypnotized them and told them that they were going into this really warm, wonderful jacuzzi that just makes your body so relaxed. And he went into this hypnotism that profoundly got into their psyche. First person got in for 15 minutes and then all of a sudden realized that it was freezing cold. Next person lasted over half an hour. Next person lasted even longer. The last person had to be taken out of the ice for his own safety after an hour. And then he was told, you know, we're all done. Thank you very much. And he didn't realize that he was hypnotized coming into the center when the doctor shook his hand. And the nurse said, the doctor wants to say thank you to you. We're all done. So thanks very much for participating. The doctor comes in, shakes his hand, puts him under a hypnotic state. And he says, you're going to go outside and there's a backpack on a motorcycle. You're going to grab the backpack. You're going to put your hand in and there's going to be a gun in there. With your other hand, you're going to pull out the photograph. And as soon as you see the person in that photograph walk out that door, you're going to pull out the gun and shoot him 3 times in the head. So the guy does exactly that, shoots the guy 3 times in the head, and then goes just like he's instructed, go back upstairs and go to sleep. The doctor comes in and he goes, do you remember what you just did? And the guy goes, no. He goes, let me put you under so you remember. Puts him under and he remembers. And the guy goes, he gets really upset. And then the doctor goes, oh, it was just a simulation. Let me bring the guy in you think he killed. He brought the guy in he thought he killed. And he's all of a sudden relieved for a second. Then he starts crying again. He starts crying again because he realized that he can be taken to do anything anybody wants. That was without breaking him into multiple personalities. That guy had the highest security level known to mankind.
So this was just a TV show. It wasn't MK Ultra.
And this was in 2 days, not 13 years. What Stanford took from me was my life. You know, people get preconceived notions when you're changing jobs all the time. That creates an inference of instability. How do you have stability into a situation where people are using you on their beck and call? And here's what's even scarier. Pretend like said person, let's say Billy Ray over here is my control. He's the one that turns me on and off and puts me on assignments. What happens when he retires? What's the formula for bringing in the next control? Do they give him a moral compass thing, or is he just the genesis of evil? And who gave these people the right to play God? Ted Kaczynski is a talking point. There's a very good possibility that he was doing what he was programmed to do. And what do you do with somebody like that? These are questions that need to be answered, because he didn't at 13 go to Harvard to be programmed to be an assassin. What do you do with poor Ted? He's dead now, but these are questions that need to be answered. Because I don't know one person that would willingly apply to be part of MK Ultra. It destroys your mind and they change you into something that you weren't supposed to be. If people really believe in God, these are profound things that should upset them more than anything. It's what's the Bible say about people playing God? I'm not going to be arrogant and quote them, but we all know what they are. And they have a very warm end spot that you're going to spend the rest of your life in. You know, where barbecues can happen all the time.
Yes. Yes. And so you went through that, and then what was your transition out of all of this? How were you able to get out? And like, when did that breakthrough come for you where you realized this is what happened to me?
I'd like to know that when it, I'm looking forward to the when it happens. It's like one of the anecdotal stories I told you last time was when this gentleman, his name is Dan, was saying, I'm sick and tired of your bullshit stories, you know, and then all of a sudden, as we're driving over Highway 2, you know, where there's a cliff on one side and a cliff above us on the other, you know, all of a sudden a black helicopter with no tail rotor numbers all of a sudden pops up and is following us all along the road. and then disappears when it's 100 yards across this ravine to where the road ends up, and it's a mile to go around to get to there. By the time we get over there, all of a sudden the helicopter pops up again. He screams like a little girl that he wants to get out. And I say to him, where are you going to go? It's a cliff on the left and a cliff on your right. You know, and I'd like to know when that happens. I go to a play in Menlo Park, and I look over, and the guy that's on stage 1 second is in the control booth right next to me the next second, and then he's over in another place over here, another place over here, and the day after this, that cast doing the play is doing a table read of my script. And the one gentleman all of a sudden says, I didn't believe anything you were saying until we got to this torture scene of you, Mark. And he said, did you know there's CIA proprietary technology in that scene? And he told me that I didn't have the clearance to be told what it was, because he admitted that he worked for the CIA. And I said, why is the CIA still following me? And he said that when they know that I'm safe, that they feel safe. And that's a bullshit story, you know, telling me that type of crap. They feel safe when I feel safe. That's a bunch of crap. I'd like to know when they are going to stop. My late girlfriend and I went to 227 different Indian nations, and it was a combination of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Indian police following me. And the moment they started following me is when I found out about all the fraudulent money that's stolen from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And when it's not the Bureau of Indian Affairs following me, it's the CIA. And why? Because they taught me how to surveil, and they taught me how to ditch people. So I ditch their tail and follow their tail, and then all of a sudden confront their tail with, what department of the government are you? And all of a sudden they run away like rats to their cars and flee.
What about the
So I'd love to know when they're going to stop, you know, shagging on me. I can't even drive by Stanford Research Institute without them obviously either having something in my car or having my phone, because they start running everywhere the moment I get near their facilities.
I guess my question would be, when did your programming stop? Like, when did they stop accessing you?
Mission trips.
1989 is the last mission I went on.
And then after that, it's been the harassment and the surveillance. Yeah. So you've been targeted since then, essentially, and they're keeping an eye on you.
The CIA guy stated, and he was also an active military trainer too. He stated that they had been following me the whole time because I'm a security risk.
Because you started remembering, or
because of how well I remember everything.
Yeah.
When did
and
you?
How I remind. I have information that keeps them away from me. Is the safest way of saying it.
When did you remember? How old were you? It seems like you had instances where you were remembering while you were in the program, and they.
Oh, the whole time. The whole time I remembered. I figured out a way to give information so it wasn't as if I had bleed over. So it ended up exposing, I'm sure they might have figured it out, I don't know, that their formulas, you know, are inventions that they assume are going to work. And just like any scientific study, the only way you find out if your theory is you know, relevant is to test it. And that's the reason why last time I stated that they don't really need to get you into a laboratory anymore. They can do it by sending a special signal to your television. You know, it's the dangers with power. You know, the person that we should elect in office is the person that has no interest in running for office. Because anybody that has the narcissistic thought that he or she are the solution to everything, they're not. It's the person that doesn't want to seek office is the true virtuous person that's going to do good.
And after
You know,
all
and that's,
and
go ahead.
did you have to cut your family off, or like what was the transition for you as far as the people who put you in this and the people in your life? What happened later on with that?
Well, you know, boys can be fixated with being a super athlete. And when your brother is just a fat pudding, that his nickname growing up was Splinters, because sitting on the bench, that's all he collected, not hits, splinters, you know, in his ass from the bench. So my brother set out to hurt me. He's the one pushed me off that 20-foot slide that I fell on my head on, you know, from 20 feet on a cement slab. He's the one that threw me in the San Lorenzo River, only to realize there were people watching him do it, you know, 100 feet away. Then he all of a sudden realized that he had to save me. Or he's also the guy that watched me run through a barbed wire fence and rip my nose off my face without warning me. He's also the one that when I came back from Highfields Farm, I felt like an unwelcome guest in his house and only went downhill from there. He's the one that would go out of his way to go over to Fred's house, my friend on Mercer Island, and tell him how horrible of a person I am. And why would your brother, you have to ask, why would your brother go out of his way to so paint such an ugly picture of his brother? Why is it so important to sabotage everything your brother does? When an investor calls up and says, I'm going to hire Mark to build my hotel in Lynchburg, Virginia, why would your brother go out of his way to make sure that I wasn't hired by giving me a horrible reference that I didn't even put him down to give?
So basically,
I have nothing to do with my family because they don't answer my phone calls. My older brothers blocked me. And why? My older brother, when I was at Highfields Farm, raped my 12-year-old girlfriend and got her pregnant. And who was the dumbass that made sure that he wasn't prosecuted? Me. And who dated my 9th grade prom date? My older brother, when we left to Seattle.
Basically,
so my brother's worth hundreds of millions of dollars and goes out of his way to make sure he destroys me at any given opportunity. My brother, the same brother who told my younger brother that every one of you that are going to die is not going to cost me a penny and I'm going to make a small fortune off it. He's got insurance policies on all of us. He's made a small fortune off of the death of my mother when it was supposed to be part of her inheritance, which was supposed to go to all of us. He made a small fortune off my father when he died and kept all of the money.
Stop now. The thing is, it wasn't MK Ultra that estranged him from his family. It was his family. It was
our family was destroyed in that valley. My older brother didn't fight back until the last day he was a senior in high school. And he finally kicked Stan's ass. I fought every freaking day. And you know what I say that pisses her off? I was the loser and my older brother was the winner by not fighting, by beating the shit out of them, becoming a multi-millionaire. My older brother's still my fucking hero. It pisses the shit out of her.
Yeah.
And so
because he rose above it all and he won.
And you were the only one that was used in the programs? Did your brothers suffer from any of this or go through any of the same things as you? No.
No.
They didn't even know what happened to him. It's only your mother.
You have to realize that when my mother is going around telling everybody, introducing me as Mark's our little liar, that she has to continue that to make sure that nobody believes anything I say, which has been the #1 vehicle of my destruction.
But it's also, you know, her way of keeping the rest of you safe.
Yeah, not keeping. In reality, what my mother did is sacrificed me so her and the other 3 siblings could have a wonderful life. How would that make you feel?
Horrible.
How would it make you feel when I run to my mother and say, Laura's gym teacher is raping her, and my lesbian mother says, keep your nose out of her business? A normal mother, wouldn't you agree, would be calling the police? How would that make you feel?
What did she receive for basically selling you into this program? Did she get money from that?
Well, I don't know that, but I know that a woman who is the poorest person in the valley is all of a sudden driving a 68 Mustang GT convertible and can afford all of a sudden to spend $22,000 for me to go to Highfields Farm when she made $7,000 a year. So yeah, I feel like the sacrificial lamb. And I don't sound too happy about it now, do I?
No, but you would never know why she drove that car. Was it the CIA? Was it a lover? Was what?
Oh, well, there's no way it's a lover.
Why
There's
didn't
no
she
way
sell
it's a
to
lover.
feed
Because
kids?
what females,
Yeah.
what rich females are going to be in the Santa Cruz community for my mother to fall in love with? My mother's lover was Pat and Ernie. And I don't give a flying fuck about using these people's names, because this is what Pat and Ernie and my mother would bitch about. They bitched that Al Nerney, Pat's husband, didn't want to be a success in life, and he was only the regional director of Rockwell Power Tools at the time. And they bitched about this guy not wanting to be a success. And why is this success so important? Because Pat spent vastly more than her husband made.
Stop now with that.
You know, and no, this is important, because what kind of a role model is that for a boy like me to see that a man is just a wallet, and the only value that wallet has is how thick is it, and that it's okay for your wife to just cheat and it's all right. To me, fidelity is the definition of a relationship.
I agree. And speaking
And
of,
you know how I learned all this crap? Not from my family, by dating girls that had wonderful families, and the girls eventually would say, you're apparently more in love with my family than me. And the honest truth was, I was, because it's so wonderful to see a husband talk to his wife and be in love with his wife, and a family talk to each other. I get emotionally moved watching Ugly Betty, because Betty's family is so wonderful in that character. They talk to each other. They care about each other. They support each other. I never had that.
He cries in Ugly Betty just because it's a nice family.
It's important.
Yeah.
and so Marc, for you, when you met Marina, who's amazing, and I'd love to hear, Marina, your aspect too, what challenges did you have with her, because she was so willing to accept you? Was that hard for you to meet somebody who was just willing to love you unconditionally and who believed you? And then Marina, I'd love to hear from your perspective, why did you believe him? Because that had to have sounded crazy to you.
No, here's the problem is, like I've said 100 times on your previous show, I don't want anybody to believe one doggone thing I'm saying. Look it up. You know, it's just like that professor. Don't believe anything anybody says. Look it up and challenge yourself and the other people to find out if they are telling the truth, and then challenge them with the truth.
Yeah.
But how did you feel about the the unconditional love?
Yeah, like how was that? Because it seems like you had
Well,
a little bit like
let me put it this way. Let me put it this way. I don't have a lot, and your atypical woman is going to go after somebody with that has a boatload of money. And what did crazy Marina say? Well, I'll sleep on the porch with you.
The thing is, he told me about these things from the beginning, and as I said, I didn't know what MKUltra was. and I Googled it and I thought, this is really a crazy person. And I sort of laughed and I thought, let me listen him out and see when he lies himself into a corner. And sort of, I'm an artist, so you have imagination and you're curious. And so I listened, and so, but there's something in this that made me believe him. And so I met him as soon as possible to get to the bottom of this and see what this is all about. Is he a liar? Is he crazy? Is he this? Is he that? All those questions one has, especially being in South Africa and he's here. And there's just no way when you live with somebody, like for me to live with Marc, it's, as I said, all in the little details and the things that repeat itself, or the things that you see happening, or the quirks, or you cannot make those things up. There's no way you can pretend things of this depth.
Tell them how consistent my stories always are.
Yeah, but you can lie consistently also. But it's not about consistent stories. It is about, as I said, dreams, or things you say in your dreams, or you can't just put it down to intuition, because intuition can lie to you. I always say, I don't trust my gut. You have to see for yourself, because sometimes you believe what you want to believe. And I can't put my finger on it and say to you, oh, it's because of this, because of that. But it's all the little things combined, and all the, I don't have a straight answer for you. I don't have a satisfactory answer for you.
That makes sense though, because when you're around somebody, like how you were saying with the treadmill incident or the stair stepper, seeing somebody be able to go for 3 hours without getting tired, and just, you literally have to pull them off and say, stop, you could be hurting yourself. Like, that's not
while he is
normal.
sick. While he's really sick. It's not that he's in a good shape when he gets on that.
I had stage 4 cancer when I was doing this.
Yeah. Oh. And the cancer just suddenly disappeared after what, 7 years? We don't know why.
I ended up reading this medical study that high pH water, as soon as it gets to 6.8, cancer becomes in a dormant stage. And if you get your pH above 6.8, it kills the cancer. And I was drinking a couple bottles of like, for instance, this 9.0 pH water.
On your side, like an advertisement.
And after a couple of years, all the cancer went away. And to the point where, when Marina and I were at the doctor, Marina actually said, well, why do you look so disappointed when the doctor said you don't have any cancer? And I fully expected him to say, well, you got 3 more weeks to live. And I said, and he goes, you don't have cancer. And I go, what? And I sounded extremely disappointed, and I was.
You get so attached to it. And okay, we don't say it's the water, but he says it's the only thing he did differently.
I was taking the maximum amount of cancer drugs that you can take, steroids, for 7 years, and you're only supposed to be taking it for 3 years. So do the math. I should be dead, and the only logical reason I can think I'm not is because of the high pH water.
Or MK Ultra. You never know.
All I know is that everything is so freaking weird about me. I get completely the opposite effects from things, so profound that I read this research study that every medicine should be typed to our own genetic chemistry, so we don't have any side effects, and that the medicine is specifically typed for your chemical formula, because a little change in the chemistry of each person means you're going to get significantly different effects than the people that were tested on the drug. So those problems that they have in medicine right now have to be profoundly solved so they can match the medicine that's going to actually fix you instead of hurt you years later. And I don't know if you ever read about the mapping of the genome. It was started at the University of Santa Cruz, University of California, Santa Cruz. That's fixing the genetic imperfections rather than giving you drugs that give you side effects. So solving all of those problems we have now would have no side effects attached to them. Like having the skin when you're 18 years old and having a full head of hair and having a healthy body that's not going to die soon.
Well, that's called dreaming.
Well, no, that's actual fact. They ended up doing the entire study faster than they expected. And then all of a sudden, everybody's sharing information until the first company discovered the genetic solution to balding. And then all of a sudden, they realized the economic benefit. Now everybody's suing each other for greed and money and power. You know, it's scary how interconnected everything is. And you're talking about a relationship. It's the reason why all the other women that I initiated talking to were scarier than me, that I could ever be on my worst day. And they were told the same information. It was like attractive to them. And Marina was the only one that actually accepted it as a component of who you are, but not defining you on the victimization of what happened to me as a child. So that's few and far between because humans are very judgmental.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it's a really shallow thing here, but it is part of it. It was quite interesting, you know, the whole thing that happened and the way things, you know. But the interesting part disappears quickly when you realize how serious it is and how damaging it is. But by then, I was in this thing, and here we are.
You want to hear a cute backhanded compliment? I'm doing this dance routine using my martial arts, and Marina goes, "Gosh, I would have loved to have known you when you were really good at that." I think I'm doing great. That'll wake your ass up.
No, but I always say I got this old version, you know, and I just would have loved to have run away, to have okay. I would have loved to have known him when he was at the peak of his martial arts, you know, because he was so good at it, and you know, at the best dojo, and so on and so on. And I just would have loved to see it.
I gotta predicate that.
No.
I went to the best dojo on the planet, and having Judo Jean LaBelle and Go Korjavichian, the greatest grapplers and jiu-jitsu people on the planet, be my teacher. And it was absolutely an aphrodisiac to not be even remotely close to the best person in class. And getting thrown around like a little toy was awesome because I was used to being that in Kung Fu. And the worst thing that happens to you when you're one of the top people in class, everybody's vying for that position. So you end up getting, the higher up you are, the more you get beat up every day. So being the lower ranks, I was always with people that were so much better than me that everything was that profound learning curve that's so freaking awesome, because the only way you learn is to fail. I mean, every one of us probably learned more from the test that we took and we failed at than the one that we passed and we strutted around acting like we're the smartest thing since popcorn.
I disagree.
Failures always promote such a profound self-analysis and reevaluating you know, how you did and how you studied.
I'd rather take the success than the failure.
Both of them are awesome. It just one over a longer period of time.
And then Marina, what advice do you have for whether it's somebody that has a friend that's a survivor or another spouse who may be with a survivor? What are some important things that you've learned to help in a relationship to overcome the challenges and to maybe be there for somebody who's experienced so much trauma?
Yeah, that is very difficult to answer also, because I don't have a little rule book, and I don't think I'm very successful half of the time. And I would say the main thing is patience and listening over and over, because this trauma, you know, comes and comes in waves, and he relives everything. And I have to listen and listen. And sometimes I say, oh, listen, I've heard that so many times now. It gets boring. But if you listen to the contents of what is said, it is horrific. So I would say patience and imagination maybe, and just change the subject quickly. Talk about something else, because then, you know, it's directed into another channel.
You know what's equally as devastating is when you tell some people, them being that empathetic person, they internalize it so much it overwhelms them and puts them into a panic state for a very long period of time. And I'm not going to say who that person is, but it devastated me finding out that only finding out a tiny bit about what happened to me overwhelmed them to the point where I thought I was a better profiler knowing who I could say something to, and finding out that just devastated me, that could hurt somebody that profoundly.
But the other thing also is because we've been working on this for a long while, you know, preparing for a show and this and that. So we went over the facts and we went over his experiences over and over, because you have to record some things and film some things, and
because saying everything the exact same way over 100 different times on video.
But the thing
and that's what makes me happy, is my story is consistently the same every time. You know, it's so easy to be listening to other people's experiences, right, and integrate a lot of the words that they're using or cliches they're using into your story. And I don't ever let that happen, because I don't want to ever be accused of not having every nuance of what I'm saying my own story and not integrated into other people's stories.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is, because of all these repetitions, I've gotten used to it. I've gotten desensitized in a way. So I can say to him, pull yourself together now. Or instead of, oh, poor you, let's sit in the corner, you know. Or in a way, the desensitizing thing is because of all the repetitions. And we get, that's what I'm saying to him, don't tell your story to other people, because they're not prepared for it. I'm used to it. To us, it's like going to buy groceries.
Here's the quagmire. When you're trying to get funding for a show,
others not used to it.
You have to be talking about the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and the more titillating topics you're talking about, the more attractive it is going to be for, you know, getting that potential investor. So it's like a quagmire where anytime you're around somebody that's got the ability of funding you, you'd be an idiot to not be trying to sell that show to that person, because you never know where funding is going to come from.
Yeah, but normal people are not prepared for that, and they shouldn't be, because it's not normal.
Right.
So I was.
So what ends up happening, long story short, is you're re-traumatized as an adult, because what happened to you, people don't feel comfortable talking about.
So he gets re-traumatized and re-traumatized, but I get sort of more
Desensitized.
yeah, and stronger or more objective or
Yeah, you're like, it's not as shocking to you. You can carry it now instead of it being so heavy. You can carry it with him instead of it affecting you, where you're like, I can't look at it like a lot of people are. You're like,
yeah.
touch me because I'm comfortable. I can carry it now. I'm strong enough to carry it.
Yeah, we were watching this show. We were watching, you know, the only way I can keep on a treadmill is watching something light and easy on TV. And then we were watching Grey's Anatomy. And then he said, but you look, you watch all these surgeries without blinking. I said, yeah, well, it's only blood. I'm used to MK Ultra. I can watch that anytime.
That's
I've been
so true.
desensitized.
So Mark,
I was a surgical orderly at a hospital, and I tried to get over my phobia of blood, and all I had to do was push a cart forward, right? And then all of a sudden, my girlfriend in the emergency room, I go down to visit her, and this lady comes in pregnant that nobody's paying attention to. So I finally wheeled her to the elevator. She falls out of the wheelchair and starts giving birth, and I'm holding all of this goo as the door opens and the doctor takes over, and I never went back for my check, and I never won it. I mean, it was my failed attempt. Another one of my delusional moments, thinking that, well, this will solve the problem.
Well, he's more squeamish than me.
I'll set your elbow, I'll set your knee, I'll do all of this stuff. I'll use super glue to sew you up like I've done a dozen times. But then after the fact, I just go into a complete panic state because of the blood and everything.
But he would sit here with a broken wrist, and then he would say, okay, I'm just going to push it in, and then he would press it hard until it clicks, and then it goes in.
And then I'll go back to work.
Yeah, and so on. It's as if the body is a little machine, and I don't know if he's so broken. He is broken, but I mean,
so broken. I've had over 100 surgeries, and I can still run through a wall.
Yeah, on the other hand, he can still do weird things he shouldn't be able to do, and it's very a lot of contradictions. And a lot of things you can see, oh, this is because of that, this is because of that. But it's I would say he's not a walk in the park. It's more like a strenuous hike up a mountain.
that's a good way.
You know?
Yeah.
It's doable. It's doable, but it's more difficult.
Right.
And you know what?
But it's rewarding.
You know how to undo me? You take my dog out of the equation.
His dog died since we last talked.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
This is a drawing my daughter did.
That's precious.
Yeah, that's Gaddacio. It's a good story, a Native American story for the end of your story. Gaddacio was the first leader of the first tribe of the nations of America. And she was so successful that the tribe flourished on multiple sides of the river. But when she died, the river is what broke them into the many nations we know today.
And that was his dog's name.
Aw, that's a beautiful name, beautiful meaning too.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry about your dog. My dog's like my best friend. Like, I can't even imagine life without him. So I'm so sorry that happened to you, Mark. They become like family. They're your family.
Yeah, he wasn't without her ever in his life for 16 years, you know.
My other golden lasted to 24 when we had to put her down.
Wow, you never hear of that. Oh my
It's
God.
probably the oldest golden retriever ever.
I've never heard of anything like that. That's like almost double the lifespan that I normally hear. Wow.
Yeah, her hips and her eyesight all went in like a week. And when I took her to the vet, he said that there was nothing that he could do.
Just imploded.
I'm so happy
Yeah,
that have had that you guys are together during this and that you're able to be there for him, Marina.
Yeah, luckily, I mean, I love the dog so much, and yeah, and she was helping Mark. So, you know, if he was sick, she would lie on bed around his head, you know, with her whole body around his head or things like that. She was his nurse, you know.
She would go from one person to another, watching what they were watching on their computer or their phone.
Yeah.
And then she'd quickly learn what button they'd push to play it. And she'd reach over with her paw and hit it again.
Don't say that. It sounds like lying. But I mean, I would say to her, if you watch something on TV, she would push you off your chair because she wants to see it.
Yeah, she wants to get on your chair and she'd sit on the chair and watch the show with you.
Or when he speaks to me on the phone, she would come and she would bark at me and look in the phone, you know, and say hello to me. And also when I was working on my laptop, she would come and watch it. So I got the idea to show her other golden retrievers. I would show her YouTube shows about dogs with their baby dogs, with their puppies.
You know,
and she would sit and watch it and bark and lick the screen and touch the screen, you know. And even the day before she died, I said to her, okay, come, I would say to her, do you want to see puppies? You know, and then she would come and sit. So even the day before we knew she would be put down the next day, she watched her puppies that night.
I gave about 15 dogs to the Guide Dogs for the Blind, only to find out that all those rescue centers and everything are just money-making vehicles.
Not all of them.
Well, I hate to tell you, but when somebody takes a dog from an unworthy source and then instantly is going to sell it for $800 or $1,400, that's a money-making vehicle.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
yep.
You know, all the dogs that I gave for Guide Dogs for the Blind, you know, you'd think that I could, you know, have them give me one right now, because my doctor knows that I'm not going to survive if I don't get one. I can't afford one. You know, the average price of a golden retriever now, $3,700.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're expensive. We should do a fundraiser for you.
Well, that'll never happen, but thank you. No, it's just, I know it's not going to happen.
It's just, he says a golden retriever is because they are so intelligent and so.
I'm afraid of dogs, and the only dog I've ever felt comfortable with is a golden retriever.
Yeah, because he used to train them, and yeah.
Did I tell you about what my dogs did? What happens when they're given to Guide Dogs for the Blind and they don't pass? You know, one of them failed because it couldn't grab the letters, you know, without getting the letter moist, so it failed the class. You know, they send them to, they offer them back to you, and then if you don't want them, they send them to these other training centers. One of them was sent to this women's prison in the state of Washington. It's called Purdy, and they have this dog training program for semi-handicapped, you know, people. So they have this big center, you know, that they hand out the dogs, and after my golden was given to this one lady, she all of a sudden pulled away from that lady and grabbed this other lady across the room by the wrist and pulled her out of her wheelchair, and then the lady had a seizure. And what they realized was happening was the dog diagnosed the epileptic seizure before it happened and got the lady in a safe enough situation. And it's developed that into now it's being able to smell cancers through skin, so they can diagnose you as potentially having cancer by just having the dog react to a particular spot on your body. And that was all because of Bracken Hollow golden retrievers that are used to be the world leaders in you know, world championships for hunting dogs and other dogs.
That's amazing. So Marc, tell me some things that you love about Marina. What has been really helpful that she's done differently for you than other people in your life?
She's really smart. She's her kids really love her, and like I tell her all the time, I'm jealous that you get to talk to your kids all the time, and all the little things. And I always wanted to be an artist.
Those are not good reasons.
No, they're very good reasons. Very good reasons. No, having an interrelationship with your children, I think, is the definition of a healthy person. So, and I've always had I've always looked at artists as something special, and it's the reason why I donated so many hours to an artist up in the state of Washington, trying to learn little things from him. And so I was always looked up to teachers and artists.
Also not a good enough reason.
And what are different ways that Marina has been able to comfort you or be there for you different? Like, what does she do different for you than maybe, you know, other people that have been in your life as far as your healing?
She just misdirects me onto something else, so I don't focus on what I'm diatribing about. I told her that the best way of getting me to go places is to just say let's go, and before I can think, I'm driving and I'm doing something, and you know, and then when I'm wanting to race home, she can just do the same thing to misdirect me to go somewhere else. So then it's just knowing she's learned how to work within my deficiencies.
I'm a service animal.
No, quite frankly, it's the opposite. I feel like she's using a leash where there's no leash laws on me.
And what
advice? No, it's no kidding. It's like, for instance, Cadasio would follow her everywhere in the house. Oh, so I feel like a two-legged version because all I do is follow her everywhere in the house.
What advice would you give to a spouse or somebody that has a friend that's a survivor as far as comforting them or interacting with them or being there for them? What are some helpful things that you've learned from having a healthy relationship that you'd like to share?
Well, most people in those situations of being a victim, you know, need to be in counseling and need to be taking medicines that'll help them. And unfortunately, I've done everything I can, and the doctors have told me that there's no way of erasing those memories, and there's no way of getting rid of the problem. It's just trying to manage it under a percentage formula that sometimes you're hitting a higher percentage and sometimes you're hitting a lower percentage. And sometimes things make past memories come back and overwhelm you, and you have a really bad panic problem.
But what is the advice you would give?
My advice is to be completely honest with people, tell them the truth, because you know you're never going to get what you want in a dish at a restaurant unless you order specifically what's going to work for you. So if you're not telling the truth and you're not honest, then you have pretty close to zero chance of getting what's going to satisfy your needs.
That's really good advice. And is there anything else that you guys want to talk about, whether it's your relationship, MK Ultra, Stanford? Is there anything else that you guys had prepared that you wanted to share today?
I'd love to inspire some attorney to actually start helping some of the people, specifically, you know, me. You know, the monumental task of taking on these people is impossible for an individual, but it isn't for an attorney that knows how to work the system. You know, and I've had attorneys tell me in New York City that they won't help me because either a whole bunch of their fellow attorneys in that law firm or a lot of the people they do work for are Stanford people, and they're not going to jeopardize anything for, you know, shaking that, you know, that nut tree. You know, they're not interested in doing that. They're either not interested or they're afraid. And that's heart-wrenching. That's heart-wrenching when somebody can so victimize you, and everybody in the world looks at what they're going to make out of it rather than having the semblance of a moral compass.
It also takes a lot of
you know what the Bible says about doing what's right and having a moral compass and doing what's right, even if one of the cliches my mom taught me, doing what's right more often than not, it's going to cost you, but you still have to stand up against it. And the up against it is what I used for the trilogy of What Happened to Me as a feature film. You know, those stories need to be told. We need to know about our failures so we can learn from them and not repeat them. If we can't talk about things, then humanity's lost. If everybody wants to fight, I'll fight you. It's not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to get me anywhere. Talking is going to get us somewhere. Finding common ground is going to get us somewhere. Standing up for virtuous things over and above what you stand for. Case in point, I don't personally believe in that abortion should happen. But it's not my right to tell somebody else how to control their own body. And the moment society wants to pay for that baby that everybody wants born, all the way through to a successful life, then we can start talking about abortions. But a woman controlling their own body is prerequisite. Once again, I don't believe it personally in abortions, but I don't think that what I think should be applied to everybody in the world. I'm an inclusive person. I think that business deals should be win-win situations, so both parties want to come back and do an investment deal again. Why would you want to destroy the person that helped you succeed? A sensei is nothing more than a teacher, and teachers are supposed to be honored with reverence.
But the thing is, what would be really great is if there's an attorney somewhere who has the courage to take this on.
To stand up.
Like in Canada, they do it all the time, but here, not. And
case in point, if I had the money to go to an appellate court for all the fraudulent things that happened to me in my divorce, I could win that hands down. Well, when something like that's going to cost you $200,000 to show that my ex-wife's attorney was best friends with the judge / commissioner that heard our case, and that when my children were finally taken from me, when my children were finally taken from me, my ex-wife, this is what she said when she came to get them. She told the sheriff that I had kidnapped them. He said, well, when did he kidnap them? And she goes, 3 months ago. And what he said back to her is, you just got around to noticing? And he's the one that refused to give the children back to her, said she's nuts and dangerous, and that I should go back to court. Back to that court in front of that best friends with the judge. And that judge almost arrested me for kidnapping. So everything's all about money. $200,000 to write my name. And you know what that appellate court would do? Would take my divorce all the way back to our divorce when I got nothing for a $2 million total assets that my ex-wife and I had. California is supposed to be a 50-50 state. So how can there be justice in this country when it's out of reach of 99% of the people? It's all cause and effect.
We do need brave people that can step up in those positions. You know, there's got to be people.
Challenging. The CIA admitted to what they did in '76 and promised to find all the victims and make them whole again. The only thing I understand with what that means, make them whole again, is to make them economically healthy enough that they can try to have somewhat of a semblance of a normal life after that. Well, the greatest intelligence service on the planet seems to have never found one person.
But the thing is, what my quagmire is there's nothing hidden. There's nothing in, or say an attorney is taking this on. It's not that there's things that's going to be unearthed that nobody knew. Everybody knows what it was. It was out in public. It was out in the court. Everybody knows what emerald was. So all the only thing is, help these victims, put it right, make a little bit of right in all this wrong. It is not as if it's going to open a whole kind of worms for the government.
Look at what the CIA could benefit from coming forward and saying the mistake we made, and state, we're supposed to lead like parents lead, by teaching our children that lying and doing bad things, you have to admit your lie, and then you have to profoundly undo it. That should not change when you're an adult in modern society. So the CIA could use this as a marketing opportunity of a lifetime, when the image of our intelligence service and the FBI, for a lot of reasons, is in a quagmire. They can right their ship by owning their mistakes, by being a human being and stepping forward and leading like leaders are supposed to lead. And it's like I said previously, it's a challenge to them. It's a challenge for instance, I used to call it, I know Dianne Feinstein just died. I used to call Dianne Feinstein's office and Barbara Boxer's office, the ex-senators from the state of California, all the time. Dianne Feinstein is in charge for the funding for military and government entities. That's exactly what the SRI was. She refused to take any of my calls. She refused to have any of her assistants do anything for me. And why? Well, let's see. Would it be a shock to find out that these politicians get a lot of money from Stanford and Stanford Research Institute? And that would make a little hiccup in that funding source. Oh my fucking God. Standing up for somebody's human rights versus your money and power.
Yeah, because
I wonder why I don't give a goddamn. I'm a liberal Democrat, and I don't give a goddamn about Dianne Feinstein at all.
The thing is, it's all about human rights being violated.
Exactly. And when somebody's human rights, for instance, I told you about my broken penis last time, caused from my dick getting stuck in that zipper when that man that was raped me zipped up my pants from behind, right? So I have that reminder all the time. It's not, I don't even need to have a photographic memory to remember the nuance of everything that happened to me. I've got the scars on my body to prove it. I've got holes in my body that I don't know where they came from.
Yeah,
I've got scars that I don't know where they came from. I had the end of a knife taken out of my back by my family doctor. Then what am I supposed to say to him when he says, where in the hell did this come from? I was being tortured, and the guy stabbed me in the shoulder blade and broke the blade off, and I apologized for it. Years later, it came, I had a big lump on my back. The doctor slit the skin and squeezed it out. There was this big growth around it. He cut it open in the middle, and the end of the knife is there. What this country I love so desperately has allowed to do to people like me is ungodly. And somebody needs to fucking own it. How many people are like me that aren't an uppity Jew that killed themselves?
They've been programmed to kill themselves.
Yeah, and they program in an off switch. So you're not a jeopardy to them.
What I would like to see is, we've been working on the show forever, and we had, it's about his life, the personal life, and people are scared. And the thing is, it's nothing to be scared of, because it's just a life and things that happened. It's not putting anybody in jeopardy. And I would just like somebody to fund this bloody show, because it would be a really good show.
And it's not even that.
we had people who wanted to do it, but it was
up against it is even better. Up against it is even better than the Valley, because it's told in this incredible Robert Fitzpatrick, the executive producer that had already gotten the funding from it. Robert Fitzpatrick at this time was the president of Allied Artists, a studio that had gone through bankruptcy, had been bought by the Crown Prince of Dubai. Robert had been doing all of the music production under this format. He got the funding for us, and he was training me to be an executive producer, and he made me feel like I had gotten the funding for it, where he set me up with the person that funded it. That's the type of moral compass that I want to be when I grow up. The type of Robert Fitzpatrick wanting to share his knowledge and make other people successful. And he ended up dying of a lung transplant the month before we were to leave to South Africa to film it in the Cape region. And, it's sad to say that it wasn't made, but the funding was through his production company. So the funding had to go back to the investor. So it's.
And the 3 scripts are still there.
The trilogy is incredible. Yeah. Robert considered Up Against It an Academy Award-winning potential movie. And if it was done right, it would have been.
I would love to see that too. That would be amazing if somebody could step up. So we have a couple action points. If anybody knows a lawyer or somebody willing to take on this film, somebody that could fund it, please reach out. And is there ways that people can get a hold of you guys? I think I asked you guys this last time, and I think you said you guys don't have social media.
Yeah, because this is sort of not advertised, but they can
email us.
Email me rather, because Marc never looks at his emails.
Okay.
You've got my email address. You've got his telephone number. You've got mine too, I think.
Yep. I think I don't have yours. You can give it to me though.
Yeah, I'll give it to you. It's a South African number, so it works through WhatsApp. But if people have WhatsApp, otherwise his phone. But email address, Facebook. I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
Messenger, Messenger with Facebook.
Let me ask you a question. What has inspired you to want to even talk about this?
I don't know how not to. It's awful. How do you know this happens and you don't want to do something? So it's very emotional for me. I know people who I met you, these are real people who have gone through this. There's still kids going through this today. I don't know how people aren't doing something. It infuriates me. I didn't want to do a podcast. I wish somebody else did, but they weren't. So I did, it's it's our duty.
I went to do interviews on the Stanford campus, and it was anywhere from a liberal arts section to the economics department. And when I'd interview people and show them documents, for instance, this one Japanese guy that was after World War II was held prisoner and experimented on. He was given roller coaster drugs, uppers and downers, right? And he was flailing when they gave him the uppers one time, broke the valve, so he got a whole bunch of the drug, right? Died. They're up here going, well, what do we do? Oh, we better take him down to the incinerator and cook him, right? That's against the law. Okay, so they're about to put him in the incinerator. He comes back to life. So what do? They do an experiment to see if they can replicate it. They kill him again. He comes back to life. So they decide he's too mentally brain damaged from our experiments to release now. So we're going to have to replicate it again until he finally dies, which he finally did. I showed that Freedom of Information Act document to all of these students in economics and liberal arts. None of them cared about it. All they cared about was, they stated, all we care about is graduating, and I'll add my little print to it, with their golden fucking diploma. That's all they cared about. Now, also interviewed people at the University of Berkeley. Do you know how many people broke into tears over looking at that one document? Profound, 7 out of 10. And here's one of the prerequisites to go to Stanford or Berkeley. You have to be willing to take classes outside of your major to broaden your knowledge base of humanity. It turns out that by the time you're a junior, you realize the gift that that school gave you by forcing you to learn something outside of your specialty. The people at Berkeley have the moral compass that you and I aspire to be. The people at Stanford are spoiled rich pricks.
So you are one of those people with a moral compass that are very.
And that's what I'm saying to you, young lady, is you have a moral compass that you're willing to, you're interested in raising up humanity. You might be a Republican, but you want to talk to Democrats. You want to build a bridge. Here's a cliche I use all the time. I love talking to Republicans because we both learn something out of that conversation.
Yeah.
But that doesn't apply to MAGA nuts, does it? They don't want to talk. They want to go into their crazy diatribes and they want to espouse hate and who's responsible for it. They don't want to be inclusive. They want to be exclusive. You either think like me or you're out. And what happened when we're village to village? That one village would decide on Thursday that they're more fundamentally more conservative Christians than the village down the road, and they'll go and kill them. And they'll use that moral compass to justify the killing. You might have seen a similar example at the beginning of the movie Slumdog Millionaire, where one village runs across that little river and kills the other one because they don't think exactly like the other side of the river. Instead of finding common ground that brings you together with the other side of the river.
It's not only in America. I mean, it should happen between countries.
The only way, exactly, the only way you learn about what happened in the past is to apply it to the present. It's the reason why I keep bouncing back to the present. Because if you have no social ability of seeing how it applies to us day by day, how uncomfortable must it be to be that black man walking on that sidewalk towards two white people that run across the street so they don't have to walk past that black man? Do you know how small that must make that man feel? That that black man can't drive anywhere without being pulled over 5 to 6 to 7 times a week just driving to work. How perfect that person has to be all the time.
Well, and I
how
think
Jews are so stupid that they don't realize that the band of earth that they came from, the Middle East, the only people that lived there were dark-skinned black people. So that makes all Jews ancestors of blacks. They should find common ground with those Africans everywhere. They know how the Jews have been treated. Everybody should find common ground. Everybody should appreciate the attributes that everybody brings to the table. Everybody's not going to be Einstein. They might be Einstein in the outback. They might be Einstein in the swimming pool. But give me a break. Value in humanities is what's going to save us. The Trump thinking of the world is going to destroy us.
I'm not a political person personally, but I think regardless of what people believe, I think we can all come together for the children. Like, that doesn't have any type of a political affiliation at all. There's nothing
exactly
with kids
exactly
that identifies as red or blue or left or right. You know, we can all come together for the kids. And that's the one movement. The government's never going to have a campaign advocating for children because they know that that's the one thing that could unify us. You know, and so we need to throw it all away and say, what is one thing that we can all come together for? That's an easy one. Kids, our most vulnerable population. We can
And
put
the
away
future.
our political, yes, it's our future. We can come together and prioritize them and fight for
Well,
them.
you want to hear something interesting about the children is, do you know in Japan, one of the highest paid jobs is a school teacher. You want to know why? The Japanese willingly understand that school teachers make chemists. School teachers make nuclear scientists. School teachers make them all. And if you don't honor your school teachers, you're half of the way done. You know, it's honoring our senseis, which are our teachers. It's giving reverence to people that, you know what the Indians do when it's their birthday? They give gifts to everybody that have contributed to their lives. When they get a raise, they're supposed to give the gifts to all the people that got them to that job and that raise. It's honor, it's reverence, it's humanity. Do you know that the Indians looked at the gay in their tribe as having a special gift, not demoralizing them into suicide? The profundity of what we could learn if we take the time. Benjamin Franklin was ridiculed because he would go and he'd visit the tribes and he wouldn't want to talk about how great white society is. He'd want to learn everything that they knew. Democracy is based on the 6 tribes of the Iroquois nation who had a democratic principle and formula where, for instance, the reason why these 6 tribes warred so few times compared to white man is because each tribe would elect a sachem that would go to the Grand Council and negotiate the rules that kept them from warring with each other. What destroyed that was all of the white people killing off the Indians and destabilizing their environment. Benjamin Franklin specifically bases our democracy on the Iroquois nation, not Greek and Rome democracy that 1% of society voted and 99% of society were slaves. So do the fucking math. Honor the Iroquois nation. Learn about the Iroquois nation. Why is it the only people in the United States that know about the Iroquois nation are in the northeastern United States where the Iroquois nation was? How marvelous of a formula that we have. Do you know what Alexander Hamilton said? If we continue calling the Native American the nobleman, it's going to be harder to demonize him to steal his land. That's your Alexander Hamilton. Make a play of it. The man was the ugliest racist there ever has been in our country. You know, it's a shame what people don't learn in history because we do repeat it so goddamn much.
Yeah.
It's sickening. The amount of people. Do you know how many people that Stalin killed after World War II? 6 million. Eisenhower watched Stalin march 3 villages of Jews through a minefield in order to clear the minefield. Then when there were no more Jews to march through it, he marched his own companies through it. Eisenhower almost threw up. He was so sickened. That's the evil that becomes when you start thinking about nationalism and hate. And that group of people are lesser than we are. They should only get a half a vote or no vote at all. You look at the movie Mississippi Burning and realize that's not even the whole story. It's so ugly of what humanity can do because of hate.
If Mark sounds like a racist in reverse, he's not. His girlfriend is Snow White. We used to fight about this in the beginning, and I would say, "I'm bloody well white. What do you think?" So it's not.
And I'd openly say, you know, if you're not the one at the hands of the racist act, you don't own it. Yeah. You know, that's the funny thing is the people in the CIA is the same. They're not responsible for MK Ultra per se, unless it's still continuing. So why are they afraid of confronting it? Why are they afraid of throwing it in the trash and telling society they've thrown it in the trash? You know, it's the same with white people. You don't need to feel responsible unless you are, because you didn't do it. You know, but honoring somebody and openly advocating for them isn't that hard, because that racism can come back against the white people, for instance. And the fact that the African Americans in our country want to be here and we want to be part of our system should tell you how much they love America. I trust Black people more than I do any other culture on this planet. They tell you the truth, and they'll tell you what you don't want to hear, where most people won't tell you the truth. They'll tell you exactly what you want to hear. I'd rather hear my faults from some person stepping up and being real. I value that man, and I honor that man.
No.
You know, 7 out of 10 of the Congressional Medal of Honor winners in our country are minority. And most of them are either Latino or Indian. And here's a little secret: Latinos are Indians. Because imagine there wasn't a border on our southern part of our country. Just because your tribe is on the south of that border doesn't make them a Latino. That makes them an Indian. Some of those tribes of the 227 I went to were in Mexico. And a lot of what they wanted us to teach America is that we're Indians, we're not Latinos.
And I appreciate you guys coming on and sharing, because you're right, like, we don't know these important things in history. And so I really appreciate you guys sharing about MK Ultra, Project Paperclip, and all these different things. And it's been such an honor getting to have you guys on here. And Marina, I appreciate you sharing too. You guys are amazing. And I appreciate, you know, I'm so happy that you're here to tell your testimony and teach us. And is there anything, any closing words that you guys want to say before we end for today?
Polypropylene?
I mean, that's a good one. So anything that you want to say, Marina?
Not that I can think of now. I think I've said more or less everything. Do you think I need to say something more?
Why are South Africans so hot? Oh, never mind.
Oh, you guys are so cute.
Sorry.
No, you're so good. Marina's absolutely beautiful. You're so right. I appreciate you guys so much. It's good to have you guys on. And I'm gonna link I'll link your YouTube documentary below. And Marina, if you want, I can put your Facebook down there. That way people can find you. Or they can reach out to me to get it, whatever is easier. But I'll go ahead and link all of that. And you guys, please go support them, support their documentary. I'm gonna have all of that in the show notes. Go find all of us as well. We couldn't do this without you guys. It's such an honor having you guys and all of your support and everything that you guys contribute to the show. So you guys, thank you so much. God bless you, and we will see you next time.